The destruction of the temple is not only a tragic event, rather it seems to be an outright violation of Jewish law. And the one violating the law is none other than God himself. You see, the Midrash tells us that God himself abides by the very laws he instructs us in his Torah. But by Jewish law, it's absolutely forbidden to demolish a synagogue. And we know this law from the temple, where it's a biblical violation to destroy or smash even a single stone in the temple building. Now, if this is the case, how could God allow the destruction of the temple? This is clearly a violation of this law. The answer is that while it's true that it's forbidden to demolish a synagogue, there is one exception to the rule. And that is if the demolition is for the purpose of immediately rebuilding and renovating the synagogue to be built in an even superior way than it previously was. Because in such a case, the demolition could hardly be considered destruction. Rather, such a demolition, for the sake of improving and rebuilding, is considered an act of construction. And in a similar way with the temple, if the demolition of the temple is for the sake of rebuilding and enhancing the temple building itself, then such a thing would be permitted. And therefore, God's destruction of the temple is not an act of demolition. Rather, it's an act of building. Because the destruction of the temple is really just the phase one of the rebuilding of the third temple, which will be far greater in measure. You see, even though the first and second temple, as great as they were, ultimately, because they were built by human hands, they were limited in nature, and therefore they were destroyed. The third temple, however, is going to be built by God, and therefore it will be eternal. This is an enhancement of unlimited proportion, and therefore such a thing is permitted. And indeed, God got on with his building project immediately after the destruction. For our sages tell us that on Tisha B'Av itself, immediately following the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the soul of Mashiach was born, allowing for the preparation for the upcoming redemption. So what emerges is that the rebuilding of the third Beis HaMikdash is not something that will only begin in the future. Rather, its construction is well underway, for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash itself was step one in its rebuilding. So on Tisha B'Av, on the one hand, we mourn the destruction of the temple, and at the same time, we wait to see the revelation of the third temple that is already built, ready to be revealed.